So hello everybody, welcome to the next episode of Authentic. Today I have Dimitry Ruvin, who's with us. He is a homicide detective here in Montgomery County. He's also been one of my friends for about 20 years or so. Dimitry, welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me, guys.
So let's get into it. Just tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of give me your life story.
Okay, so I was born in the old Soviet Union, used to be, the USSR. I lived there until I was about 14. I was in a country called Azerbaijan, which used to be part of the Soviet Union. And once the Soviet Union fell apart, it became its own country now. And I moved here when I was 14, with my fam. We moved to... my dad had an aunt that lived in Baltimore, and she had to sponsor us because we obtained like a refugee status when we first came. And so my dad had to, petition through the American Embassy for us to get the status. And in 1994 is when we moved to America.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like living in ex-Soviet Union?
I was thinking about it on my way here because I figured you'd be asking about that because me and you had these conversations a lot of times, obviously, and I figured that's one of the topics we're going to discuss. So I actually thought about it on my way here. I thought, and one of the things I was thinking about, my mom died this year, and she wrote a memoir. I knew she was writing it. She wouldn't let us see it, but she was writing it in the last year of her life. And last week, for the first time, my sister read it. And last year, for the first time, I actually read it. And it reminded me of some things back home. And I just thought about it on my way here. I thought about some things my mom wrote that like, some things I kind of remember, growing up as a kid. Some things I had no idea, like Mom, I had no idea this happened, One of the things she wrote about that I thought about on my way here is, we growing up, we didn't have much, we went through a lot where, we didn't have food, we didn't have electricity, things like that. And she writes about that, and I remember some of those things. And one of the things she wrote about was when her dad, my grandpa, died, your neighborhood would kind of come out and support you, right? And she talks about this time where, a bunch of our neighbors came over and brought food and brought whatever little they had. And she wrote about that. And I was like, yeah, I remember that clearly because all of a sudden we had this abundance of food in our house. Yeah. And all our neighbors were home, stopping by. And I thought about that time because I was like, yeah, Mom, I clearly remember that time that you talked about that my grandpa dying. And so that's I guess that's one of the things I thought about when I was on my way here, that hey, we didn't have much, we didn't have a lot, but I still grew up a happy kid. I had friends, we ran around, we played soccer all day long, we were running the streets, and it was a good childhood. I can't complain. Yeah. It's just when the Soviet Union fell apart, your whole life kind of fell apart, now it's a new country, new government, who's going to be in charge, so the structures kind of all fell apart, and a lot of stuff went down, war started, they were, killing a lot of people. I remember going to school. I think we talked about this story a few times, me and you. I remember going to school, and I was going up. I had to take the metro to school. I was going up the escalator, and that's the first time when I knew something went down. Mm-hmm. Where I saw tanks on the streets, people were shooting, and gunshots, And one of those, like the Russian soldiers was up there, and he was like yelling for me to just get down, get back. And I remember running down the escalator and going back to the metro and catching the metro home. But that's when the Russian troops kind of came in to, quote unquote, keep the peace. And, at that point, everything kind of stopped. I didn't have school for months and months and months. I remember, and we were, at that point, we were kind of far from the main city, which Baku was still the capital of Azerbaijan. And I remember, looking out my window, seeing tracer rounds and things like that. So that's when I think my parents were like, okay, we gotta do something. We gotta move. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when the idea, I'm sure my parents, looking back, they were in their 40s. I'm in my 40s now. Like I can't imagine what it's like, to like you now have your whole life, your kids, everything like that, and now you're like, I gotta move to a whole different country, learn a new language. I'm sure it was pretty tough for him. Yeah. So that's one of the things, like I said, I thought about on my way here. Yeah.
I have a question for both of you guys. So now you both had, I would say, a difficult time in your childhood. Mm-hmm. How do you guys react now that you look back at how everything started and now where you guys are at and what you achieved in life?
I mean, I think many people who achieve big things start from humble beginnings. I do think that sometimes it can break you or it can propel you. You know what I mean? It can make you want better for yourself and the people you love, and so that can be the fuel that drives you. I know for me, it's been one of the things. I think if you peel back the layers, that really drives me to try to be the best. Just to try to make sure I provide a good living for the people I love and make something out of what I've become. So, but I think that's a normal story. It's one of the stories here, especially here in America, where you have the ability to kind of move. A lot of people, regardless of your drive, you don't have a way to make a means for yourself, and here you can. So, that's what I use to kind of like push me forward. And then I've been in a system where if you work hard and you get if you're lucky and put in the time, good things can happen for you. So.
Yeah, I agree. I look at my kids I feel blessed in a way where they don't have to go through something like that, where they don't have food, and there's still people here in this country that go through that too. And so I try not to dwell on like, hey, looking back, like T said, I try to kind of concentrate on the future, and I'm doing my part, and it's not like, I should be patted on the back like, hey, you're making a good life for your kids. Like that's what you're supposed to do.
Exactly.
So, but, once in a while, I guess when you're alone in your thoughts, I'm sure at least for me, sometimes I do think about these things. I try not to, but I sometimes I do. And I'm like, hey, would my kids, in today's environment, I don't want to say survive because of course they would survive, but like, what would they be like, and luckily they don't, I don't have to, I guess, deal with that. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I think I don't want to glorify a struggle because it's not something you want to glorify. It's, living a hard life doesn't make you better in some sort of way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If anything, I'm trying to put my kids in a position where they don't have to and kind of give them a leg up and try to, give them a good foundation where they can use it as a springboard to go and do bigger and better things. So,
yeah, and I think a lot of times, I think in the moment, like you don't look at it as a struggle. Like I said, I didn't have school for, however many months, but I would be like, oh, I'm going to run around with my friends and play soccer,
Yeah.
So I think at the time, you don't look at it like, hey, I'm sure there's kids, like you see images of them in like war zones and they're out there playing soccer with like collapsed buildings and for them it's just like, that's the environment I'm and like I said, I don't remember being like, oh my God, this is so bad. Like it was my everyday life, and like I I had a pretty happy childhood. I had, like I said, friends, and everybody around me was kind of living the same way I was living.
Yeah.
When we didn't have power, like I thought about it on my way here. You didn't have power for like 5 days. My kids wouldn't survive. Like, who's gonna charge my iPad? Like, what's it? We have a power bank in that house. But I remember doing homework with like candles. Like, we would light up candles, and my dad would be like, "You gotta do your homework."
Yeah.
And like, when is the power coming back on? Hopefully tomorrow. And I remember like waking up and be like, obviously cold shower because like you had no power.
Yeah.
And there was no, there's no explaining it. Like you couldn't call, your power company, like, what's going on? Like we get to it when we get to it.
Right.
They had these like rolling blackouts where just like we'd be no power. But yeah, I actually found it to be like, I was little, so I was like, oh, fun, we're sitting with candles, and like all my neighbors got no power, and you like look outside and just see candles everywhere, So I didn't really look at it as like I'm struggling or I'm going through it. I was just like looking at it like, oh, this is good. Yeah, this is I'm living this my life, Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about when you actually left. I remember I've had this conversation with you before, and so you were saying basically the Russians were coming onto your city, and before they got there, you guys.
Yeah. I mean, they were already there. So we were living like that for months. And they were already there. So the fighting already started, and the basic, I guess, premise of all that was, Azerbaijan is bordering Armenia. Armenia is mostly Christian, Azerbaijan is Muslim, and there was infighting even back then. It's still going on to this day. And at some point, the Armenians kicked out a lot of Azeris from their land. That they'd been there for generations, and they basically kicked them out. And said, you're going back to Azerbaijan, to the place that they've never been. It's a
foreign land.
Yeah, it's a foreign land to them, and they got kicked out. So that started this whole thing with the Azeris. We're like, well, then we can kicking everybody else out too, So that was like the I guess the callus of this whole thing, that this infighting started, and it's still going on to this day. It sparks up when they'll there's fighting between Azeris and Armenians, and it's sad because like we had neighbors, our neighbors were Armenian. They lived there forever. They were born there and lived there. Their grandparents were born there, and all of a sudden, there's this animosity towards them. So, it was an interesting time. I've never been back. I heard that I have cousins that have been back, and I heard it's a lot different now. And so someday I'll probably try to make my way back there and trying to hear myself like you were talking about. Trying to hear myself. I'll try to make my way back and just kind of see where I lived, how I lived, show my kids. Yeah. This is where your dad's from. We just did it for Yasser, obviously. We went to Morocco, and it was, the kids' first time there, and, they got a chance to see. We actually went to a granddad's house. And there's somebody else living there, but they opened the thing for us, and we went in there and went upstairs with a view of the city. And she was just like, "This is where I live." Tiny little apartment with like however many family members they had living there. So I wouldn't mind doing that too, because I kind of grew up in a similar situation, between me, my dad, my sister, me, and my grandma. So 5 of us lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. So. I wouldn't mind like showing the kids like, all right, this is when you complain that you don't have your privacy. This is how I was living.
No such thing as privacy when we were.
Yeah. So I wouldn't mind going back there someday.
So you at 14 you came to the States?
Yeah, I came to the States. I enrolled, and I was already. I think I was
You were in Baltimore?
Yeah, I was already like maybe a month away from my 15th birthday.
Okay.
So here I come, you know, I spoke a little bit of English, you know, like, I mean, we had English classes, conversational, like, hey, where is the library? And like, nice to meet you, you know, things like that. But you don't, you know, I couldn't, like that sucked. That sucked so bad, especially being a teenager, you know, you're 15, you know, you first, you know, looking at girls, whatever, and you can't, you know, you can't communicate. You know, like, you know, I would be in whatever English class, and there would be somebody sitting next to me, and it just sucked. I couldn't. So I had ESOL classes where, you know, I had to learn English and slowly.
How long did it take you?
I mean, I guess I'm still learning it every day, right? I think I started to get comfortable probably in about 3 years, where, you know, I could get by. But I think not until I really graduated high school. And I think I've always had jobs. Like when I first moved here, I think within 3-4 months I already had a job. I was like bagging groceries. Mm-hmm. And that taught me more than any school. In ESOL lesson. Because I was, you know, I was working at a supermarket in Baltimore, and like, you know, everyone there had to speak English. You know, I had to force. So you kind of forced to speak English, and I think, you know, once you move on, and I'm sure you can appreciate that too. You start having friends, and you know, that teaches you way more than some teacher pointing some things on the blackboard like, this is how you say it.
Yeah, I remember the Georgetown camp.
Yeah.
I think the first like 2 days I couldn't speak with anybody. I mean, I knew, you know, a couple sentences, you know.
So just for the audience, he went to a Georgetown basketball camp when he was about 14.
14.
For a week or two. So that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, so you were like, I remember you back then, and you reminded me of me. I mean, because obviously you were that age.
Yeah.
The nice thing about that, though, you're playing sports, right?
Yeah.
So when you play sports,
the language of the sport.
I
think that helped a lot.
But it's still like, I can't, like, obviously I can't imagine because I've been there. But it's hard. It's hard, man, because like you want to communicate, and like, you know, like I think about it all the time in like the NBA. You got these players coming from Yugoslavia or something, and I'm like, what's your right? Like, coach? Like, do they have a translator? And you slowly see those guys. You know, over the years they get better.
Yeah.
You know, like I look at like Ovechkin, right, playing hockey. Like you look at this old. You know, 20 years ago when he played, you couldn't speak 2 sentences together. And now they're interviewing him, and he's, you know, able to talk or whatever. I think about it all the time. Yasser has a friend who's her husband played professional hockey, and he ended up leaving here. I think he played for the Hershey Bears for a little bit, and then he left here and went to Russia. I want to say he's still there, but it was like Siberia, Russia, in the middle of nowhere. And there was an article that I read about him and a couple of his teammates from America. They're like living there in the middle of nowhere, have like their wives all hanging out, and they don't speak any Russian. It's like, what's your day like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I can, even now that, of course, I'm not fluent yet.
You're fluent.
I'm like, sometimes I realize, like I tell you every time. When I come back from school after a day of just hearing another language that you never get used to, you know, just hearing another language. I get home, I'm like, let me get, like, I don't, sometimes I even try to avoid talking to him because I can't speak Italian with him. So I just want to, you know, speak my language and not having to translate everything in your head.
So at some point, I can tell you, it'll flip. Obviously, if you stay here and if you're not going back to Italy, it'll flip at some point, and you'll start having thoughts in English. And it flipped for me at some point. I wish I could pinpoint So like what specific date? But at some point,
I already think in English.
Yeah.
Most of the times, it's just I don't know what like. It was frustrating. I think like 2 months ago, I was coming back from school and I wanted to watch an Italian movie.
yeah,
But now Netflix, once you get in another country, it just shows you, that country.
Yeah.
Type Netflix. So I couldn't find an Italian movie. And I got so mad because I really didn't want to listen to another language. I just wanted my language so I can even look at my phone and still hearing and understanding without having to, focus and like translate.
So
But
have you found anybody here that you could, well, outside your fam, like that you could speak Italian to?
No.
Really? No.
I had I was in a reading class, and this is funny. I heard someone speaking Italian. I heard only ciao.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Wait, what's happening?" I was thinking maybe something in my head, then I kept hearing, familiar things. And so I got out of the classroom and there was an Italian class during my reading class. And yeah, so there I spoke Italian with the teacher. She was actually from a close city to mine. And yeah, but besides that, I don't even think there's another Italian on campus, from what I know.
Right. Well, then I think that's why your English is getting better and better, because you forced to speak English. Like if you were talking Italian all day long, it wouldn't happen probably.
Yeah. Okay, so so you're here in the States. Did you have culture shock besides just the language?
Yeah, man, of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, it takes you a little bit to get used to things here. And I'm not even talking about like the abundance of stuff in America, just your everyday interactions, the way people treat each other. I talk about with my dad about it all the time. I think back home, and I don't know if you can relate in Italy, you've always approached and I hear that from other foreigners, from like Africans, and you've always approached a stranger or somebody as if they're trying to get one on you. Like, like you just don't trust. You were raised not to trust people.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you come here, and at least in the 90s, everyone was just like nice. If you left something somewhere, your wallet falls down, somebody will be running after you. Hey, here's your wallet. You just dropped it. Most people, right? I think most people will do that. And that was just, to me, that was weird. Like all of a sudden you're just like taught to kind of trust people.
Yeah,
and that the intentions are good, that they're not trying to get one on you. I don't know if you can relate to that.
I can relate. I find when I leave the house with the car, and there is some our neighbors walking and they say hi to you.
Yeah.
At home, people don't care about someone that they don't know. They don't say hi. They don't. It's not just they not trusting. Maybe like you. It's just different. People don't talk to each other like that. At least I'll say you're.
What
like
about smiling?
Not even that.
That's a thing. I think that's like an American thing. People will smile at you. Hey, how you doing?
But I like it. Now I'm excited every time I see someone walking. I go like this. So I like it. It's different, and I actually I prefer it like this. Than being just straight.
Oh yeah. No, I agree, man.
Like the other day, I told you I talked to our old neighbor. And he was so nice. He was asking me, "How are you doing? See you picking up sticks.
Mm-hmm.
What a beautiful day." Stuff that you're not used to here at home from a stranger. That.
Yeah. I don't know if you could relate to that through your travels or not really.
I don't have that experience because I haven't lived over. I mean, I did when I was really young, but I haven't lived there. But so for me, it's always an American viewpoint in that from like the South versus the North and the differences there in Southern hospitality in the North. But I do find even here specifically, I do find what you're saying to be very true. Where it was weird when I first moved here. If I were out in my yard and a car drove by on the street, the person in the car would still wave at me.
Yeah.
And I was like, what in the world? Like, why are you waving at me? You're in a car in the street.
But that didn't happen in the South?
No, this was new to me.
Okay.
This was new to me. I mean, if I'm walking by you, yes, you have to acknowledge the person's walking, even if it's just a hello or a head nod or something. But for them to be in a car and then to look at me and then still wave at me, and now I find myself doing it, and it's something I find pretty cool too. Now you see me, I do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I can tell who's lived around here for long and who's new because
I find it weird when they don't do it now.
Yeah,
you know,
so
I do it.
like
I always do it.
Okay, but so you were here at 14 and you went to high school in Baltimore?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So I graduated 97. Mm-hmm. I went on. I did a couple of years at University of Maryland. I left school. Mm-hmm. It took me forever to get my degree, but I did because I always wanted to just. Unlike I have a sister who's loves school, multiple degrees. Like she loves school. I hated school. I'm more of like.
People person.
People I'm more of a learner from just like what I was talking about earlier. That I learned more working than I did in school.
Yeah.
So, but I always knew that was going to be my goal. Like I want to get back and finish it up, and I did. I want to say like 5 years ago, I finally got my degree, and I'm glad I did it.
And so then. Did you go straight into the police department?
No. So when I graduated high school, I didn't know, just like many other kids, I didn't know what to do, A really good buddy of mine joined the Marines, and he was trying really, I think once you join, they'd like try and get you to bring 3 of your friends. So he was like really, really trying to get me to join the Marines, which looking back probably would have been awesome. But I didn't. He went on and went overseas, and I ended up getting an internship at NIH here in Bethesda, just doing computer stuff. I then got a position there, was working in computer field, and right around 9/11, when 9/11 came, that's when I decided, I want to do something, I guess, more meaningful. I couldn't picture myself sitting in front of the computer for the rest of my life. Yeah. So I guess it was either, now at that point I was 21, so it was either going in the military with like 18-year-olds, or for me it was joining the police department, and I did a couple of ride-alongs. I was already in Montgomery County, so by that point, when I was at University of Maryland, I moved to Montgomery County. I was living here in Silver Spring. So I just looked at my local police department where I live here in Montgomery County. And, back then, this is 2001, they really needed, there was a big boost for police officers. Because everybody was I was leaving computer field, and everyone was actually going in the computer field. Mm-hmm. So at the time, my parents were like, "What the hell's wrong with you? Like, are you nuts?"
Right.
Like they were not happy at all. Just like many other places, you come with the big distrust of police and what they do and all that. And my parents were just like, "What the hell's wrong with you? You have a real good job. You actually took a pay cut to become a cop." So. I like I said, I did a couple of ride-alongs with a couple of good officers. I was just all of a sudden, I'm like, well, let me apply. I didn't. I know for some people it's like a goal. That's like they grow up thinking, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a police officer. That was never a goal for me, really. I just kind of fell into it, just like many other things in my life. I kind of fell into it, and I didn't know how long I was gonna stay. I remember being in the academy, and they were like, you're gonna look around, and 20, 25 years gonna go like that. And now that I'm almost there, I think I've been on about 23 years. So it's like, I like, it flew by, man. Like, I never look back, and it's just like, it was an awesome, awesome time at that time to join the police department and be a cop,
Can you give me some of your highlights? What did you learn during that time?
Being a cop?
Yeah.
So I think the best thing I learned that I carried throughout my whole career, when you first become a cop, first of all, I looked young. Nobody was listening to me. I was like 21. I looked like I was 15. And nobody. Like, I remember telling somebody, just sit down, sir. And they'd be like, no. And I'd be like, well, what do I do now? I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I learned very quickly that if you're a dick to people, they're going to give it right back to you. And I learned that so quickly that if you treat, I would say, unless they're on drugs and not listening, if you treat somebody with respect, I would say 90% of the time they will give it right back to you. Whether you're wearing a badge, not wearing the badge, whether you're just dealing with a person. And looking back, like, I should have learned that quicker, because, we all have that stereotypical cop that comes in and, I'm the man, you're going to listen to me. That stuff doesn't work. And there's always going to be somebody that's bigger than you and stronger than you and can kick your ass. Yeah. And you kind of learn that quick, and I learned that quick. And it carried me throughout my whole 20-some years. I still do that, where you treat somebody with respect, they're going to give it right back to you. So I think that's one of the things I learned real quick.
What is the funniest thing you experienced being a cop?
Oh man, I had so many stories. I'll give you a quick one. Me and my buddy of mine were working. We were working like an evening shift, and one of the things we got to do is, if somebody hits a deer and their legs are broken, we got to go and shoot the deer, because they're not gonna survive.
Yeah.
So we got a call for a deer stuck in the backyard. He got hit by a car and ran into somebody's backyard and was just laying there. So you have to put down the deer. It wasn't my favorite thing to do. I love animals. I don't want to shoot a deer. And I was taught very kind of early, all right, that's one of the things you got to do. So me and my buddy go up there, and he shoots the deer. And back then we had the 9mm Italian Berettas. Those rounds couldn't penetrate anything. They were just the cheapest. Yeah. 9mm round. I don't remember what it was, but and the deer's moving too. And so my buddy, shot so they teach you got to shoot him behind the head, because that way you put him out their misery. But he had to, he shot him in the the torso, and the deer's moving, and he basically, anyway, shot him a couple of times. So we go back into the house, and the lady opens the door with the little girl, and my buddy's like, well, we had to put down the deer, and the deer went to deer heaven, and and the little girl looks at us, and she's like, and it took you 8 shots to do it? You asshole.
Did y'all learn to shoot in the academy?
Yeah, but I remember, especially at night, you come over, you got your little flashlight, they know it's coming. Yeah. It sucks, man, because you're not trying to kill a deer, poor defenseless deer. Yeah.
That's one.
So that's one of, I'm sure I have many.
Many stories.
Many stories, man. But, yeah.
So when did when did you become a detective?
All right, so I did 5 years, doing being the patrol. So a lot of departments in the United States, especially bigger departments, you got to do your time of patrol. Just going in on 911 calls, traffic accidents, domestics, not just 911 calls. And after about 5 years, most departments start letting you put in for other things. Whether you want to be in K9, you want to be SWAT, you want to be a detective. So I did 5, and I applied to many different jobs. But I ended up in one of our detective sections. So we have districts, and each district has detective sections that deal with like burglaries and robberies, non-fatal shootings, stabbings, things like that. So I did that for 3 years in our Silver Spring station, and after 3 years, I applied to homicide, and I've been there for about 16 years, since late 2008. Oh, wow. Yeah, so time flies, man.
Yeah, you've been there for a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it had been that long.
Yeah. I just thought about it the other day. I was like, I had to count. I was like, oh man, I've been there. There's one other person there that works for that's been there longer, and then it's just me.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So one thing that you may not know about, but obviously Dimitry knows about. He's kind of a local celebrity here. He's been on TV a few times for some high-profile cases.
It's one of my favorite show to watch. So I have it saved on my TV. The Price of Duty.
Yeah.
Is that the name?
Yeah.
I watch it probably once a month.
Those guys did a good job.
Yeah. So is that Price of Duty? That's the name of one show, but we're on another one as well.
Yeah, I've been on a few of those. I've been on Dateline. I've been on Snapped. I at some point in my life, I was actually, I mean, you know that, I don't know if you know that I had a business on the side. I was doing wedding videos, and so I was kind of fascinated with like production and TV. So I looked at it as a chance to like see how those guys work.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that point, I did a lot of these. I think I've probably done maybe like 6 or 7 different shows. About various cases.
All about the Lululemon case?
No, there's other cases. I've done other cases that I've had over the years. And they still call me. Like, I probably get a call a month for a show because they're so popular now. Everybody does it. Every channel has it. And I think about 5 years ago, I kind of started declining all of them. And I just...
How'd you feel? Huh? Had your feel?
Yeah, that, and I think it takes a lot to put on an actual like good production. Mm-hmm. I find that a lot of times these things are put together so quick. They'll do like a recreation. They don't even care about the story. They don't really care about the victim. They don't. They just kind of, especially if it's like a high profile or anything. They half the time you watch it later and you're like, that's completely wrong. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of like the real like the production houses that actually concentrate on the story are pretty rare. So I found that I found that like I don't want to like I told myself I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know if it's helping the victims. I don't think it's helping the family, because a lot of times with specifically the Lululemon case, I know the victim's family, and I think it's like they constantly have to relive that, and I'm sure at some point they probably don't want to.
Yeah.
And there's really no good way of doing it, because in every homicide case there's a family that left behind, and I really don't know if they want to be constantly reminded of whether it's on TV. I obviously I've never lived through something like that, but I don't know if I would want to. I don't know if I would want that. Mm-hmm. Especially if that's not the goal. Like if the show is concentrating on the glory of it or whatever the case may be, and not necessarily on the victim or who they were, how they lived. I don't know. Yeah. So that's for all those reasons I kind of stopped doing it.
Okay. That makes sense. What do you think, as a homicide detective, what do you think is the hardest part of your job? Is it? processing the deaths, or is that not even hard
Well,
anymore?
so the hardest thing I think is dealing with families. It's some of these cases last years. Some of these cases, never get solved. I had a case here that two young kids were murdered by their mom, and the case ended up being dismissed for mental health reasons. And I talked to, and we never found the kids. Like the kids, disappeared. Obviously, well, we believe the mom killed them. We charged her with that. And this is 2014. I'm still like the dad, Troy. Still. I talk to him once a month. He's still out there looking for his kids. I actually did a podcast. That's one of the things I did about a year ago. Troy did a podcast about this case, and he asked me to participate. And I've always said no in the last 5 years, but I just couldn't tell him no because he's out there still constantly looking for his kids. We never found him, and he feels like it still needs, even though the case is dismissed.
He needs closure.
He needs closure. He needs to find his children, and I feel like we failed him in that. We never found him, and we worked very hard. Obviously, we did a lot on this case. But yeah, he calls me the other day on a random Saturday. I was on my way home. He called me about 8, and last I remember, I looked at my phone, and it was 11:30.
Oh God!
So I talked to him for 2.5 hours about things we've done on the case, things we could have done better, things that we could still do. We're still doing things on that case right now. But yeah, so it's. I think that's the hardest thing that, most of us get into police work to help people, So when you're going through something like this, you feel like, all right, even though I've done everything I can't, I didn't help him. He never found his kids, he never got closure. He's still out there constantly, working on trying to find his kids. And, I think that's one of the hardest things is dealing with families, especially in cases where the murder is not solved.
What percentage of cases do you think are solved?
So I think the nationwide trend is down. I think our stats were back in when I started 2008, 2009, we were closing about 90% of our cases, which is great. I think the national closure rate is about 50%. Okay. And I think it's going down, in this area and other areas for a multitude of reasons, but it's down significantly.
Okay.
But I think nationwide it's 50%.
Okay. So
Yeah.
50-50.
Yeah.
Wow. Is there any truth to the idea that if you don't solve it in the first 48 hours, you probably aren't going to solve it?
I think it's true, and I think it's true more so for the big police departments, big city police departments, your Baltimore, your DC. I think the sheer amount of murders that they get, it's just, unfortunately, you have a few days to concentrate on what you got, and then you got the next one in 2 or 3 days. Yeah. I think we're lucky here where, we get a chance to work on homicides that are, older. Yeah. But I think that the stat on that is they're saying that it's not necessarily solving, it's about getting a lead. Okay. So what they're saying is if you don't get a lead within the first couple of days, chances are you're not going to solve it. Mm-hmm. Because if you have witnesses, if you have people that care about this person, they're going to come through immediately and tell you okay, you need to look at this guy. He had a problem with this guy. Or whatever. But if in the first 48 nobody really says anything, chances are they're not going to come through 2 years later.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it stands from, is that. Yeah.
What do you think's the biggest deterrent to solving cases? Is it just the community doesn't speak out?
Yeah, I think that's a big part. That in certain in certain areas, certain circumstances where it's frowned upon to talk to us, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everybody. It's not a secret. Snitches get stitches type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a huge part, I think, of especially in I think in homicides where, you know, it's looked at as if someone was you know, put in this in spot, right? Like where you know, someone's doing a drug deal, right, in your neighborhood, and there's a shootout and the drug dealer dies, and I guess if there are witnesses, they're like, well, why would I put my life out there?
Yeah.
For
Now I'm a target.
Yeah, and I understand that. It's something that we deal with. It's something that we're, you know, faced with every day, and you know, especially with like gang cases and things like that. You know, people are, if there's a gang member that was shot or whatever. If you're just like some regular guy and you got kids and you're walking down the street, you're gonna be like, why would I put myself in this spot for a gang member? You know, because I could be next. Yeah. And I'm sure in some cases that's valid. You know, so that's a big one. Yeah, we face this one for sure. And some, you know, some of it is just, you know, sometimes we lack evidence. Sometimes we lack. I mean, cases are solved by evidence, witnesses, and confessions, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have no evidence, or if you don't have 2 of the 3,
it's hard.
It's extremely hard to solve a case. Okay. You got to have at least 2 of the 3.
Makes sense.
If you have one, can you share an experience that on the job that changed your perspective in life?
Changed my perspective on life. You know, I talk about it sometimes where, so I do this thing called Citizens Academy, and we've had that for years. I think I've been doing it for over 20 years, where, you know, about citizens come through once a week and they kind of listen to different police perspectives, whether it's from us, SWAT guy, you know, range staff. So I kind of tell them, I get that question sometimes, like, did it change you? How does it, you know, how does the job affect you? That kind of stuff. I think for me, I kind of have to always remind myself that my job is not the world, right? Mm-hmm. I always have to tell myself that not everyone's an asshole. Not everyone lies to you. Not everyone will do anything to conceal things. I have to constantly step back and tell myself most people are good. Mm-hmm. Most people aren't criminals. Most people, I truly believe, sometimes when we interview people, you know, quote unquote bad guys, suspects, I say that a lot. And I mean it. I actually say I believe in basic goodness of people, right? I truly do. And I feel like sometimes, you know, people are, and they've done the most despicable thing. They murdered somebody, right? A lot of times, unfortunately, I don't want to say you can understand it, you know, because but you could see how things happen. Mm-hmm. You could really see how things happen. Mm-hmm. And I don't look at people as like they're truly evil, right? Mm-hmm. That's one of the things I learned. You know, it's very easy to condemn people and say, oh, they're a murderer, they're this, they're that. Outside of a few people that I've dealt with in life, most of them were just put in a bad spot and kind of made a bad decision. Mm-hmm. And so I learned that. I learned that very quickly. And one of the other things I say, and sometimes I'll say it in the interview room when we're talking to people, and again, I also mean it, there's really at the end of the day, there's like no celebrate. Like, if you're going to tell me like what happened, we're not going to there's no celebration. At the end of the day, we don't get more money because you told me this happened. Mm-hmm. We don't high five each other. It's actually a very sombering experience, you know, after a homicide case, and because there's no winners.
Yeah.
You know, I remember one of my first ones. I was getting ready to testify as I was outside the courthouse, outside the courtroom, and I was this guy stabbed this other guy a bunch of times, and I'm sitting outside. I'm getting ready to testify, and his girlfriend was there with his little kid. His little kid must have been like 5. And this little dude comes up to me, and he had a little car, and he starts like pushing the car towards me, and I push the car towards him. And he smiles, and we're kind of playing with the car, and his mom's letting us do it. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm about to go testify, and my goal, my job, is to put this guy to prison, hopefully for the rest of his life. And like, it's a very weird dichotomy. Like, and here I am playing with this kid because it's not personal, and I feel like, but I have a job to do. This is what I do. And at the end of the day, like I said, there's really no winners. Like, I don't walk away from that case and think, oh my God, I'm so, outside of a few times that I remember over however many years I did this, that I was like, I can't even say I felt joy. Like, it's not a joyful occasion, really. But it's just like, at the end of the day, you feel like, all right, I did my job, and you concentrate on the victims. You know, you're helping a family at least get some sort of closure. Yeah.
So since you said this, what do you find most rewarding about your job?
I think probably dealing with the families again is also a big one. There's really not many rewards, you know, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's not really like a joyful, it's so great. But over the years, I have dealt with, you know, we try not to get attached to the families, you know, because I've been taught early enough, don't treat this, you got to look at mechanics that don't attach personally to any cases, because it's going to start affecting you in life. And, but I can't help myself, but a few times, you know, after you're dealing with the families and you get, you know, a guilty plea, and hopefully they're holding somebody responsible, you feel like, you know, the families are like ecstatic, you know, they come out the courtroom, and when I first, you know, meet the families, it's like, I'll tell them it's going to be a long process. It's going to take sometimes years, you know, and when they finally see a closure, you know, there's no greater, I'm telling you, there's no greater feeling, man. It's like you walking away and you feel like, okay, we did something right by these people, and we at least, we're not going to bring that person back, but like we help the family, that at least they know that someone is being held responsible. It's a pretty good feeling that you walk away with.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what do you think is probably, what do you think is one thing that the public, non-police, don't understand about the police and your point of view, just in general?
I think that the biggest misunderstanding that the public has is that they think that, whether you see stuff on the news or whatever, that like I think the media concentrates on so much negative police interactions, and I'm sure there's some out there, of course, but I was just reading some statistic the other day. It was like there's 50 million police interactions with the public a year in the United States, and you may get a chance to see like 8 or 10, right? Bad ones. And I think if people just like me will have to step back and say, all right, not everybody's a killer, not everyone's a liar, not everyone's a criminal. I think if the public only kind of were to step back and say, okay, well, what about all the other 50 million interactions that no reports, nothing? I think if you keep it as a matter of perspective, that there's a lot of good police work is happening out there. that goes unseen, unknown, nobody ever hears about it, is I think that's, if people could just kept an open mind and said, all right, there's so much good that goes on out there, and I think it goes unnoticed. I mean, as a matter of fact, I know it goes unnoticed. Yeah. There's everyday interactions that I've seen of officers out there that go way above and beyond, and like, and I'm not in patrol anymore, right? Like I'm not on the streets, so but I see it, and then there's so many times where I tell myself, man, I wish somebody would see this. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I wish somebody would, like, I wish I had
it's almost a PR problem, right?
Yeah.
They don't. I think in a lot of times you only hear about the negative.
Yeah, everything.
Don't have, like, I was thinking about this when I was talking about the government, just in general, because the same thought, where the government provides so many services, so many things that we don't hear about or people don't really understand, and then you get in a situation like now where it's very easy just to say they don't do anything, they're all bad, they're all corrupt, they're all incompetent, whatever the case might be. Sure. But there's so many things that go on, but you just don't know about it because there's no one telling you about it. There's no public service announcement. Look what we did today.
And the assumption is, at least it used to be, well, the assumption is that, like you said, it's a PR problem, but the assumption was like that you were good, unless shown otherwise. Now it's almost like the opposite, and you have to prove that you're good, and that sucks, like, right? Because I mean, most of the guys out there just trying to do their job, and I'm telling you, I see it. I think I told you the story, like one of the, I think it goes back to your question, like the first, my first few years as a cop, I was learning from some really good people that were out there, and I remember that story where I kind of bring it up sometimes, where we had this guy and he had schizophrenia and he was a big dude, and we would respond to his house and we had to fight him a lot. Sometimes we did, sometimes we didn't, but the parents would call because he would start wrecking things in the house and he was off his meds or whatever, and we had to take him to the hospital, right? And sometimes we had to fight him. Like I said, sometimes he was a big dude. I was involved in a couple of these. But one day there was a guy on my shift. His name was Jimmy Barnett, and we were working daytime shift. And I'm driving in my car, and I see Jimmy Barnett, and he's driving the other way, and I see this guy in his car on the front seat, and I hit him up, and I was like, "Was there a call for this guy? Like, why is he in your car?" And he was like, "Nah, I'm just taking him out to breakfast." And I was like, "Wow, that's like." And then, like, Jimmy showed me, like, there was no call. He was just like, but the next time we respond to his house and he's off his meds, he's going to be like, oh, that's the guy that took me to breakfast. Yeah. I'm not going to fight him, right? So those are the little lessons. That wasn't recorded. There was no body cameras back then. He didn't do it because of some community project that was assigned to him. He did it because he had a couple of hours to kill and there was nothing going on. He was like, well, let me go take him to breakfast, right? And, like, I'm telling you guys, there's so much of that goes on that nobody knew. I knew because I saw him driving. And, like, it wouldn't have even been known to me. He would just did it. And nobody would have known. And there's so much of that out there, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we recognize that there are a lot of good cops, and we recognize that in any field you're going to have some bad cops or bad people, bad apples in those fields. How does the police itself, like, as someone who's a non-police, I sometimes wonder if you get away with a lot more because there seems to be almost a code amongst police that they don't tell another police, right? So
yeah, there's that. I mean, obviously it's gotten better over the years, and I'm sure some departments are better than others. I think in certain places it kind of probably feels like, all right, it's like us against them mentality, right? Like, if this guy's gonna back me up and I'm depending on him for sometimes my life, then there's little indiscretions that the dude does that I'm gonna excuse. Yeah. I think it starts with that, right? And then I think in certain places it then, am I gonna excuse some guy calling somebody a name, like call him an a-hole, and him not being professional, you know. And then next time, well, am I going to do this? And I think it slowly starts, and like it'll be like, oh, next time I'll see him take money. Okay, well, he probably needs it, you know. I think it kind of progresses, just like many other places, and I think that includes the police department. But I think it's recognized a lot more now than it was even 10 years ago. I would certainly hope that you know, most of us out there, if they see something criminal, obviously, like no. I think there's more and more on that. But are there still departments out there probably that still have that code of silence? And I think it's gotten better.
No.
I think it's gotten a lot better.
It reminds me of, you know, I work in real estate, and sometimes you work in affordable housing, so low-income housing. And you'll hear people talk about low-income housing and the criminal aspects and the crime aspects of it.
Yeah.
And it took me a second to come back and realize, well, really, there's 200 apartments in this apartment complex. It's usually about 4% or less of the people who are actually doing almost all of the criminal activity.
Yeah.
It's 10 houses where they're the people that are causing all the problems. And even though we recognize that it's such a small percentage of the people there, what they do becomes the perception of the whole thing.
Of course.
Right? And I think that maybe that's similar in the police, where it may be most police do good work and whatever, but you have a small group of 4% or less of all police that are probably doing, you know, bend the lines, but the perception, because those make the news, that makes the, you know, perception changes. And so one of the ways from a non-police person seeing it in another aspect is really trying to weed out that. I think it could, even though we recognize that it's a small percentage, it blows up and makes the media, makes the headlines, and it makes the whole department or the whole industry look bad.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's like this group thinking, right? Like, and then amplified by the power of the media, right? Yeah. If you, you know, let's say, like I said, 50 million police interactions a year, and there's 10 that are amplified on every channel, then you're going to be like, well, what the hell's going on here, right? Yeah. Like, what is happening? Yeah. Even though it's so rare. Like, I'll give you an example. I think it kind of goes to a question you asked before about the toughest things that I deal with. It's, you know, I'll go to a scene and it'll be a kid that died from a staph infection, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'll talk to the parents, and the parents will be like, you know, we took him to the doctor and they said, just take some ibuprofen, a couple of days, you'll be fine. You know, they miss it, right? They miss the staph infection, and, you know, unfortunately, the child dies. And that's probably one of the toughest things we have to deal with, children that die. So then, you know, I'm home, and you know, at that time, let's say I'm having, you know, my kids are young, and my kid's having a fever, and I'm like, oh my God, he's got a staph infection. And like, I have to remind myself, no, that's pretty rare, actually. It's pretty rare for a child to have a staph infection and die from it. But because I see it now, I automatically think that happens all the time. And I think it's the same kind of mentality with amplifying certain things on the news, where people start thinking like that happens all the time. Yeah. And it doesn't. It's actually pretty rare occurrence. With these, you know, bad police interactions. It's actually, I think it's such a, I'm not trying to underplay it, because some of those are really bad. Yeah. But it's rare. I think that we have to keep it in perspective that it's so rare. Yeah.
That's fair. So what do you do? I mean, with a job like that, you have to figure out ways to unwind, to get your mind off the job, right? So what do you do?
I found, you know, a few hobbies over the years that I've used and abandoned, and I'm still working on a lot of things. Obviously, when I was doing the videography stuff, that was awesome. I met some really good people over the years. Mm-hmm. Some of them, you know. just doing wedding videos. And, you know, it was as far away from death that you could possibly be, right? It's weddings, people are drinking, people are having a good time, and I loved it. I love doing it. I wish I could. I wish if I didn't have kids, I would definitely go back to it because I had a great time doing it. I mean, someday when I retire, maybe I still will go back to doing wedding videos. So that was my big outlet, and I learned, you know, the edit and doing video editing and sound and all that, and so that was big. I try to read. I get, because I feel like, I think we talked about that before too. Like, it's hard for me to concentrate on reading, but once I'm truly concentrating on reading, the rest disappears. Like, I'm unplugged, and then you've read for 2 hours and you're like, oh wow. And I think it's so great because you actually let your mind kind of be at peace. I mean, I try to work out. I'm nowhere, you know, this is your life.
Yes, but you work out.
I work out. I find that to be amazing for my mental health, you know. When I can do it and I do it routinely, I find myself less angry. I find myself more at peace, you know. And I listen to jazz a lot. That's my new.
He and I went to New Orleans with a couple of friends a few years back,
and it changed my life, man. I was not into jazz. I think this was probably 5 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And actually, a buddy of mine is in New Orleans right now. And I was talking to him yesterday, and I was like, dude, you have to go see Preservation Hall Jazz Band.
Yeah.
You know, Preservation Hall Jazz. I'm wearing a T-shirt right now. It changed my life because I never listened to jazz as a genre, and now that's like mostly what I listen to.
Okay.
And I find that when I'm listening to it in the car, it like relaxes me. Somebody cuts me off, it's like, listen to the jazz, man. You can't be angry listening to jazz. Now, if you were listening to rap or something, you know, they got you pumped up. You're like yelling stuff out the window. Nothing but trouble can come out of it. But you listen to the jazz, you're like, come on, man, you good. So I listen to it. I have a record player. I have a vinyl player now. I bought a lot of Preservation Hall Jazz albums. I just got one from them that they all signed. It's the That's It album. I got that one. So yeah, I think I relax a lot by listening to jazz. Plus I'm older, so I can't listen to rap.
You have to convince him buying a vinyl player.
I thought you were going to say convince him to stop listening to rap. People will never.
I grew up on
I got him a vinyl
He
of
bought
Bob
me
Marley.
a vinyl record.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have a vinyl player.
Well, you can get it.
But you know why?
Vinyl
Because
record.
they were talking about it once we left your house.
Yeah.
That you showed them
Yeah.
the vinyl.
I was just starting then. Now I got a lot more.
And they were talking about it. Auntie Lucy was talking. Oh yeah, it would be nice. So I went. I went with Syrian to Target, and we were just there. And we saw it, and we said, "Oh, they were talking about it. They might like it. They might actually, buy it if we get them something, they like."
Yeah.
We were still we were looking for something that they might like. We had Drake or Rihanna.
Yeah.
Everything. We chose Bob Marley.
Right.
It's still
Classic. It's a classic.
right?
Yes.
And we chose it for them, but they didn't like it.
Well, you never know.
Never know.
So yeah, I find that I have a record by, I think when you were at our house, I think I showed you Charlie Gabriel, who's part of Preservation Hall Jazz Band.
Yeah.
It's like a 1976. I bought it on eBay, and it still plays. Like that's what's cool about vinyl, and the sound quality is the same, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like a tape or something. That's what I love about it. And I also, in my own little melancholy moods, when I'm sitting there, I'm like, I can picture these guys 50 years ago, man, laying those tracks, using real instruments, not like pushing buttons, to make sound. as I get older in life, I appreciate it so much more, man. I appreciate it so much more. So that's why I'm getting into vinyl.
Yeah. that makes
Yeah.
sense. So let me ask you to switch subjects a little
Yeah.
bit. So now you've been here in America for 20 years. What does America mean to you? What do you make of the country?
Yeah, and you know, we again, we discussed it probably a million times, me and you, because of our friends group, lots of people from all over the place. I think I'm a little different in that sense because I think when people come from when people immigrate here from whether they come here for a job and stay, yeah, I think their opinion of America is a little different from mine. I feel like America like adopted me, right? That's my like adopted mom and dad, and they've given me everything I have in life. I mean, I work hard for most of the stuff, but I think it's still the land of opportunity that it always has been. That people that can come from all over the world and make it, and I still believe in it. Like I really truly do. I think there's this new idea that kind of taken over, where whether someone's got money or whatever, they kind of look at it like, okay, you got there because you stepped on other people or you effed over other people. I don't subscribe to that, right? Like I think most people get to where they are by hard work in this country. Still to this day, it's harder for some people, easier for some people, but this is I think that's the essential American dream. Like this country, you could come here with nothing and be a millionaire, billionaire, whatever. And I still subscribe to that. And so that's why I will forever like embrace and love this country, man.
I think that I share your view, and I think that your life and your story might be harder now than it was in the 90s.
Yeah.
I think there are more people in the country now, or there's a movement now to look at people who've immigrated more suspiciously.
Yeah.
What are they trying, not in what they can add to the country, and how you're getting a fusion of people who are driven, who want to be here, who are excited, who are, whatever reason, bringing in different ideas. They actually look at them as if they're trying to take something rather than adding to the country. And I just wonder if you were in a situation like now, like there's a country, your country was under war, and there's a country in Ukraine right now that's under war, whether or not people here would look at you as a refugee with suspicious, regardless of now seeing 20 years and all you've done for this country, all you've given, you work in the police. I wonder if we would give the same sort of grace to somebody now that's given to you.
I think so. I really do. I really think that if you just look at obviously we live in a country where everything's just amplified, right? The two, we'll take them to two sides, are just so amplified. They're amplifying the negative. Yeah. I don't think that's where most people live. Yeah. I think your everyday Americans are, just trying to raise their kids, pay their bills, and go on about their life. And I'm sure there's some elements of hating immigrants, or always has been, always will be.
Yeah, and that's everywhere.
But I think like you're getting picked up at the airport and it's some Ethiopian dude that's driving an Uber. I think most people will shoot the issue with them, and I know you don't like to talk to strangers or Uber drivers, but like it'll be I know that's one. But like me and Eddie, we would spark, especially in France, we would spark up a conversation, and I think that's most people. Still, I really do. I think most people. I mean, I can see, because immigration's on the on the forefront in the news right now. So maybe that's what, and again, if you tend to amplify the negatives, immigration's on the news, negative views of immigration will be on the news.
Well, I think it's being pushed on the news. Negative views.
Yeah,
right?
of course.
So,
Again, the media amplifies everything. But if you step out here and like talk to your neighbor,
yeah.
and I think that's majority. I think Americans are smart, man. Like you're not gonna they call BS when there's BS, and I think most people can step out of the news and live in the real world and say this guy is just trying to do his job, right? Trying to make his way through life, right? Yeah. I really do think, and maybe I'm naive, but I really think that that's still the case.
What inspires you these days? What gets you thinking forward, gets you excited, gives you hope?
This seems like a hard question.
It really is, because it's a very loaded question. T.
You can take it however you like.
Yeah. Oh wow. Let me think about that. Just I think in life in general. Mm-hmm. I would say. That most people, I feel like most people are good still, right? Like, and I feel like we are, there's a lot going on right now in the news, right? But I feel like we as a country going to come out of it like stronger, better, and I don't even want to say that inspires me really, but just like I told you earlier, I really do believe in basic goodness of people. Mm-hmm. And as long as I keep that in the back of my mind, just like my very first impression of America, just like I told you when I first came, that you had to learn to trust people, to be good. Like I was teaching that myself before I was a cop, that I had to teach myself that most people are good. If I drop a wallet, someone's going to pick it up and someone's going to help me. If I was in a bad spot and I was hurt, someone's going to come and help me. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's still the case. Yeah. I think most people will get involved. If someone's assaulting somebody or women getting raped or something like that, I think most people will come out and help. I think we're still a great society, and I think America's going to come out of it bigger, stronger, and at least that's my hope.
Sounds great.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. Thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing.
Thank you. It was really inspiring.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, thank you, guys.
It's been awesome. And thank you for listening to this episode with Dimitry. And please catch the next one whenever it's posted.
All right.
And we are out.
Out.